Zoe has bewitched this house, she muttered one night to her eldest son, Chijioke, as they sat in the living room. These days, even the maids look me in the eye. The devil wears a smile, my son. Welcome to real-life African stories, a place where ancient wisdom, magic, and storytelling come alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a tale from our ancestors. Chijioke shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. His mother's power had always been law. To question her now felt like sin. So he nodded, and that silence, his silence, fed Beatrice's conviction. Soon, gossip began to weave itself through the family compound like smoke. Some said Zoe used charm to control Topchoko. Others claimed she whispered spells in her room at night. Beatrice encouraged the rumors quietly, not through lies but through silence, the kind of silence that turns shadows into monsters. One Sunday afternoon, the storm finally began to take shape. Lunch was being served after church. The family sat around the large mahogany table, Beatrice at the head, her children and their spouses around her. The aroma of jollof rice and fried plantain filled the air, but beneath it was a tension so thick it could be tasted. Zoe, dressed in a simple Ankara gown, stood to serve her husband's plate. It was an innocent gesture, an act of care, not challenge. But as she placed the spoon in the pot, Beatrice's voice sliced through the air like a whip. Who gave you the right to interrupt elders while they talk? The room froze. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hesitate mid-spin. Zoe turned slowly, her hands trembling slightly but her expression calm. I'm sorry, Mama, she said softly. I didn't mean to interrupt. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. You didn't mean to, yet you did. These are the manners your mother taught you. Zoe bowed her head slightly. No, Mama. My mother taught me to serve with humility and speak with respect. Beatrice leaned back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. And she forgot to teach you when to stay silent. The room fell into heavy silence. Topchoko sat motionless beside Zoe, his face pale with discomfort. He looked at his plate, then at his mother, then back at Zoe, but said nothing. That silence was a knife, and it cut deeper than any insult could. Zoe's heart clenched, but she said nothing more. She returned to her seat, her appetite gone, her spirit bruised, not by her mother-in-law's words, but by her husband's silence. That night, when the mansion fell asleep under the hum of the city, Zoe and Topchoko sat in their dimly lit room. Why didn't you speak, Toby? She asked quietly. He sighed, staring at the wall. You don't understand my mother. If I argue with her, she'll turn the whole family against us. Zoe's voice broke slightly. Love means nothing without protection. You tell me to respect her, and I do. But who respects me? If you can't speak for me, I will speak for myself. Her words lingered in the air like thunder before lightning. Topchoko had no answer. He sat there, guilt heavy in his chest, as Zoe turned away, her face half buried in the pillow. The next morning, just before dawn, the real storm began. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the hallway, followed by the sharp click of heels. It was Amoka, Beatrice's only daughter, spoiled, proud, and fiercely loyal to her mother. She stormed into Zoe's room, a cane in her hand, her voice loud enough to wake the house. Wake up, lazy woman, she shouted. You think you can come here and disrespect my mother? Zoe sat up slowly, her face calm, her eyes cold. Amoka, it's early. What are you doing with that cane? Amoka stepped closer, fear written across her face. I came to teach you humility, since you clearly didn't learn it from your mother. She raised the cane, but before it could strike, Zoe's hand shot up, swift and steady. She caught the cane midair. If you touch me again, Zoe said, her voice low but fierce, I remind you that even queens bleed when caught. For a moment, time stopped. The two women stood frozen, eyes locked, the air thick with raw power. Then came the sound of footsteps, Beatrice's voice echoing down the corridor. "What is going on here?" she demanded, entering the room with the authority of a judge. Amoka dropped the cane immediately, pointing at Zoe. "Mama, she attacked me." Zoe turned to Beatrice, her face calm but unyielding. "Your daughter came into my room at dawn with a cane. I defended myself." "Liar!" Beatrice snapped. "You will not speak to me like an equal. Who do you think you are?" Zoe rose to her feet, the early sunlight spilling over her face. "I am your son's wife, Mama. Not your servant." Beatrice's hand shot up, ready to slap, but Zoe caught it midair, firm yet respectful. The house gasped. Addis and the maids, drawn by the commotion, stood frozen by the door. "Respect is not slavery, Mama," Z said quietly, her voice trembling not with fear but conviction. "You taught your sons to fear you, not love you. I will not join them." Beatrice's hand quivered in Zoe's grasp. For a second, their eyes met, 2 generations, 2 women forged by different kinds of pain. But pride swallowed that fleeting moment of understanding. Beatrice yanked her hand away, her face burning with rage and humiliation. "Get out of my house," she shouted, her voice breaking. "Forever." The words echoed through the hall like a verdict. Zoe didn't cry. She didn't plead. She simply nodded, turned, and began to pack her belongings. Her movements were calm, deliberate, each fold of fabric a quiet declaration of freedom. When Topchoku entered the room, his face pale and desperate, she looked at him with sad eyes. "I love you," she whispered, "but I refuse to live in a house where silence is the only way to survive." She kissed his forehead, picked up her small suitcase, and walked out of the mansion. The maids watched in silence, tears brimming in their eyes. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath as she left. Behind her, the mighty Okafor mansion, once ruled by fear, now echoing with guilt, fell silent again. But this silence was different. It was not the silence of control, it was the silence of consequence. And though Beatrice sat proudly on her throne, her heart felt a small, sharp emptiness she could not name. The storm had come and gone, but the air it left behind would never be the same again. The Okafor mansion stood still, too still. Its wide verandas, once alive with chatter and clinking plates, now echoed only with the hollow sound of footsteps and the distant hum of cicadas at dusk. The silence that once served as Beatrice's weapon had turned into her prison. Zoe was gone. Days stretched into weeks, and though Beatrice sat each morning in her usual chair, her wrapper neatly tied, her head scarf immaculate, something inside her had begun to unravel. Her home felt colder. Her meals, once shared with laughter and conversation, now went untouched. For the first time in many years, victory did not feel like power. It felt like emptiness. The maids still greeted her politely, but their voices carried a hint of sorrow. Addis and Ngozi no longer sought her approval, instead, they avoided her eyes. When she spoke, they listened in silence, not out of respect, but pity. And Topchoku, her beloved son, her pride, had left. He had claimed it was for work, some new project in Abuja, but everyone in the house knew the truth. His absence was a quiet protest, a wordless plea for space, from his mother's dominance, from his own shame, from the ghost of Zoe that lingered in every corner. Beatrice would sit in the living room at night, the clock ticking loudly, her rosary beads moving through her fingers as if the prayers could fill the void. But every whispered Hail Mary felt like an echo that never returned. It was in that loneliness that her strength finally began to betray her. One morning, as the sun rose behind the mango trees, Beatrice collapsed while trying to stand from her chair. The right side of her body went limp, her words came out slurred, and fear, raw and unfamiliar, rushed through her like cold water. The family doctor called it a mild stroke, brought on by stress and exhaustion. But deep within her, Beatrice knew it was more than that. It was the weight of years, the years she had ruled through fear, built walls instead of bridges, spoken too loudly to be heard, and loved too harshly to be felt. Days passed in slow agony. She lay in her bed, her once commanding voice now soft and hesitant. The maids tended to her quietly. Adis and Ngozi did what they could, but there was an emptiness in their care, a careful distance that came from years of silent wounds. The house had turned against her, not through words or rebellion, but through absence. Even God seemed to be silent now. It was Adis who finally called Zay. Her voice trembled as she spoke through the phone. "She's not the same, Zay. The doctor says she'll recover, but she's broken. She just stares at the door sometimes, as if waiting for something or someone." Zoe listened quietly. There was a long pause, and then she sighed softly. "I'll come tomorrow." Not out of duty, not to prove a point, but because compassion, she realized, was the highest form of strength. When Zoe arrived the next morning, the mansion seemed to hold its breath. The maids exchanged glances of disbelief as she stepped through the gate carrying a small bag of fruits and a basket of herbs. Beatrice lay on the bed, wrapped in a soft shawl, her once bright eyes dimmed with fatigue. When she saw Zoe, her lips parted, but no words came out. Only tears. Zoe approached slowly, her voice gentle. "Mama." The word carried no bitterness, no resentment, just quiet humanity. She set her things down and moved closer, adjusting Beatrice's pillow, checking her forehead, and finally sitting by her side. Then, without being asked, she went to the kitchen. The familiar sounds soon followed, the chopping of onions, the simmering of stew, the quiet rhythm of care returning to a house that had forgotten its sound. That evening, she helped Beatrice sit up. She fed her with slow, patient hands, as though time itself had softened. Later, she brought a bowl of warm water, washed Beatrice's hair, and brushed it gently. The older woman's hands trembled as she whispered, why are you doing this, after everything I did to you?" Zoe smiled faintly. "Because anger is heavy, Mama. And I've carried mine long enough." Beatrice's lips quivered, her eyes filling with tears. "When I married your father-in-law," she began weakly, "I was mocked for being poor. They called me names, told me I'd never belong. I swore no woman would ever look down on me again. But I turned that fear into cruelty. I thought if I ruled with strength, I'd never be humiliated again." Her voice broke, and the tears came freely now, years of pride melting into the bedsheets. Zoe reached out and took her hand, firm but gentle. "Strength is not how loud you speak, Mama," she said softly. "It's how softly you can love." For a long time, they sat in silence, two women, two generations, each realizing that sometimes, healing doesn't come through victory, but through surrender. That night, Zoe stayed by her side. When Beatrice awoke at dawn, she found her daughter-in-law still there, asleep in the chair, the empty bowl of medicine by her feet. For the first time in years, Beatrice smiled, not out of pride, but peace. Weeks passed, and Beatrice's strength returned, but this time it was different. She no longer shouted orders. She spoke gently. She listened. One Sunday morning, she called the entire family together, the sons, their wives, the maids, even the driver. The courtyard filled with uneasy faces, unsure of what to expect. Then, to everyone's shock, Beatrice slowly lowered herself to her knees. Her hands trembled as she spoke, her voice breaking with emotion. "I have done many wrongs," she began. "I built this house with my hands but ruled it with fear. I hurt those I should have loved. I made my sons quiet, my daughters-in-law afraid. But today, I ask for forgiveness." The silence that followed was holy. Tears welled in Adi's eyes. Ngozi clasped her hands to her mouth. Even Chijioke, the eldest son, turned away to hide his emotion. Then Beatrice turned towards Zay. "You came back when you had every reason not to. You showed me mercy I didn't deserve. You taught me that power without love builds fear, not family. I am sorry, my daughter. Zoe knelt beside her, taking her hands. You've already been forgiven, Mama. And as they embraced, the mansion seemed to breathe again. That evening, laughter filled the compound once more. The smell of jollof rice drifted from the kitchen, drums and singing came from the courtyard. The maids danced, the men smiled freely, and Beatrice sat quietly among them, her eyes glistening, her heart light. The Okafor mansion, once cold and divided, had found warmth again. And as the night settled, the narrator's voice lingered over the scene like a blessing. Power without love builds fear, not family. But when pride finally bows, peace returns. Like rain to dry land. Thanks for watching real-life African stories, where the wisdom of our ancestors lives on. If you enjoyed this story, drop a like, leave a comment with your favorite part, and share it with someone who loves great tales. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next journey into African folklore.